Jim is probably one of the most unlikely leaders to turn around a company like a Krispy Kreme. He was a former chairman and CEO at Wachovia Securities. He was on the board of Coca-Cola. But more importantly, he's an avid follower of Christ, and he instilled those principles into the culture of Krispy Kreme to make it what it is today. I love what he told his team. Listen to this. Our vision is much bigger than selling more donuts. Please welcome to the Convene stage, Jim Morgan.
Thank you. Good morning. What a great place to be. Thank you, Melody. I flew in last night from South Carolina. Yes, we do have airports in South Carolina. And unfortunately, I've got to fly back out today, so I apologize that I won't be able to stay around and visit. Tomorrow is one of my granddaughter's 13th birthday, and she's made it very clear, they call me Babu, that her Babu needs to be there because she's going to become a teenager. And she's been looking forward to that for, I think, almost 13 years now. So I've got to be there, and I apologize. I would tell you this is a tough slot because, Rob, your passion is just magnificent, and it's so genuine and so deep, and it alone earns trust, in my opinion. And the NCF is an organization that I have great respect for. I've been down with them in South Florida before, and they're great people. So I feel like I've got a couple of very tough acts to follow, but I'm delighted to be in the same arena as Rob and NCF and with each of you. So here's what I wanted to tell you, and Greg, you didn't realize this when you asked me if I could come here, but San Diego is a special place for me. A little over 55 years ago, my wife and I got on a plane in Greenville, South Carolina, and came to San Diego for our honeymoon. So it's something about that sentiment, and we still remember every minute of it. We remember Balboa Park and, SeaWorld and the various things, Del Mar racetrack. I'll have to admit we had to go see a horse race. We had never seen that before, and we made it up to Disneyland. But the point that I remember the very most is that we'd gotten directions from the hotel clerk about how to get somewhere, and he basically said, just go up the highway. I don't know whether it was Highway 5, whether it was the 5 at that point or not, but he said, take the La Jolla exit. And he said, it's only a few miles, something like that. So we went, and I felt like we'd gone too far, but we hadn't seen the La Jolla exit. So I pulled off an exit, went to the service station, asked the gentleman there, could you please tell me, am I getting close to the La Jolla exit? He said, son, remember I'm a kid at this point. He said, son, you passed it back a couple of miles. And I said, well, I remember seeing La Jolla, but I don't remember seeing La Jolla. When he finished laughing, he said, well, son, he said, your La Jolla is our La Jolla. And I realized then that the 2 years of Spanish that I took in high school had not retained very well within me. Before I share a little bit about my time at Krispy Kreme and the important role that our Savior played in that time, a bulletin came across my email last night. I get a lot of things from the wildlife people, and I thought because some of you were here and some of you might be going out to visit some of the national or state parks that are so beautiful around here, that maybe I should read this to you in case you hadn't seen it. Basically, it was titled A Grizzly Bear Notice. It said, in light of the rising frequency of human and grizzly bear experiences, the California Department of Fish and Game is advising hikers, hunters, and fishermen to take extra precautions and keep alert for bears while hiking in the state and national forest. We advise that outdoorsmen wear noisy little bells on their clothing so as not to unexpectedly startle the bears. We also advise hunters, hikers, and fishermen to carry pepper spray with them in case of an encounter with a grizzly bear. It is also a good idea to watch out for fresh signs of bear activity. Outdoorsmen should learn to recognize the difference between black bear and grizzly bear droppings. Is it okay to say droppings in here? That's okay. That's a good polite word, I think. Black bear droppings are smaller and contain a lot of berry seeds and some squirrel fur. Grizzly bear droppings have little bells in them and smell a lot like pepper spray. So why do I start off with that? because that's who we're fighting out there. We're fighting that grizzly bear, or as 1 Peter 5:8 says, we're to be alert and vigilant, because our enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. And it took me a long time to realize that that devil is just as present in our workplace as it is in our home and our churches. And I was a Christian on Sundays and somewhat of a Christian at home, but I tell you, I was failing miserably at taking my faith into the workplace. And it's just amazing now that I know a little bit more scripture, but one of my favorite verses, and one that I think we all should know, is Psalm 127:1. Unless the Lord builds the house, its builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchmen stand guard in vain. So what is your house? Your house is your home, but your house is wherever you are, and your house is certainly your place of work. So if we're not letting the Lord build that house, we are laboring in vain no matter what our bottom line tells us. And I believe that with all my heart. So here's a little bit of my story of how I came to know that. My career after Peg and I graduated from Vanderbilt, it was Vietnam time. So I was in Naval ROTC, spent close to 3 years as a naval officer, stayed on the same ship, had 2 captains. The 2 captains taught me everything in the world I could ever want to know about leadership. My first captain led in a way that I hoped to never copy and never see again. My second captain led in a way that I wanted to emulate for the rest of my life. And the blessing that the Lord gave me was I reconnected with that second captain many years later. And when he passed away, his family called and asked me to speak at the memorial service. And he was probably my first real outside the family mentor. So following the Navy, I went home to Greenville, South Carolina, went into the finance business. Back in those days, we called us stockbrokers. Now they're wealth managers, financial planners, but we were stockbrokers. And I had a meteoric rise, but boy, the fall was even greater. And I failed miserably. I had done so well, I went on my own, and I learned very quickly that on my own, I am not very good. And by on my own, I mean I didn't have Christ with me either. I wasn't inviting him into that part of my life. We had just adopted 2 3-day-old twins, boy and a girl. We had just gone into a bigger house. We just bought a nicer car. And all of a sudden, I had a year where I failed miserably. Had to sell the house, sell one of the cars, and we only had a place to live because a friend of my older sister's had an extra house that he was not renting, and he called and offered it to us to live in for a while. Following that third of my business life, where I was leaving my faith at the doorstep of work, didn't even think about taking it in. We moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, where the opportunity was the one opportunity that I was offered. That doesn't sound like a big move, probably, from Greenville, South Carolina to Charlotte, North Carolina. It's 100 miles up Interstate 85. But believe me, back in those days, when you were from South Carolina, if you moved to North Carolina, you would probably become a Yankee. So in my family's eyes, I'd made a big decision there. I had moved north. We lived in Charlotte. I was with a firm called Interstate Securities, which became Interstate Johnson Lane. To make a long story short, I began to bring the faith sort of in the back door. And what do I mean by that? I mean that I would even tell people that were having problems that I'd be praying for them. I would say that word praying in the workplace. Wasn't that magnificent? Wasn't that just amazing? And I would talk about how blessed we were. So I'd use some buzzwords, but I still wasn't with it. I just didn't fully get it. Did filing failure with the faith on the doorstep, I was now bringing it in the back door, kind of quietly. And we did have financial success, and we did have corporate success. And to make a long story short, I ended up being, it was a public company, Interstate Johnson Lane, and I ended up being CEO and chairman of that company. But I still didn't lead the way I needed to be lead with Christ fully in the center of that leadership. So following a merger, we merged with a bank called Wachovia, which later merged with First Union, became the new Wachovia, which later was merged into Wells Fargo. Following that merger, I stayed for about a year, and then I retired. And something happened during that retirement time that changed my life forever. I was coming back from the coast of South Carolina, listening to the radio. And in those days, about the only stations you could get late at night were AM stations, believe it or not, usually from the Midwest. Indianapolis had a really powerful station, for example. So I was listening to one of those stations. It was a talk show, and the host was interviewing a football coach. And I wish I could tell you who the coach was or what school he was with. I remember the school he was with ended in state. So it was Indiana State, Ball State. I'm not sure. I'm truly not sure. Because I started getting engrossed in the conversation. And I noticed that every single subject that the interviewer came up with, The the coach would bring his faith into the answer. And when the interview was over, the interviewer said to the coach, Coach, let me just tell you something. Based on everything I've heard from you today, I'm really, really surprised that you haven't gone into the ministry. Without hesitating, here's what that coach said. Football is my ministry. I can't tell you the power that had on me. What he was saying is, my life is my ministry. Wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, that's my ministry. And I've got to be fully involved and fully engaged, and I've got to have Christ at the center of all I say and all I do. That was life-changing for me, and I'll have to admit, I prayed between there and getting home that maybe I would have another opportunity, and rather than leaving that faith on the doorstep or bringing it in the back door quietly, that I would bring it in the front door, that I'd just bring God right with me. And by the way, when I got the chance to do that, I found out with the wisdom of hindsight, I didn't carry God in the front door with me. He carried me in the front door with him. So during that time at Interstate Johnson Lane, Krispy Kreme went public. They talked to us about helping them with that. I went to the meeting, met a few of the board members. About a year or two later, they called and said, would you be willing to come on our board? So I ended up on the board of Krispy Kreme. Now, I want to tell you something about God's plan versus our plan, okay? I failed miserably in my hometown, embarrassingly so, because I knew everybody in that town. Failed miserably. Had to move north and become a Yankee in Charlotte, North Carolina. Met the Krispy Kreme people because of Interstate Johnson Line, then got asked to be on the board, and through that ended up being asked to be the chairman and then later the CEO and president. Not my plan. It all started with failure. My plan failed. When my plan failed, his plan took over, and I didn't even know it for a while, but his plan took over. So I get to Krispy Kreme. Things are not good. The stock has dropped from 50 to about $1. But I knew it was a people job because I didn't even know how to spell donut the right way. They complicated with that D-O-U-G-H stuff, you know. But anyway, and I didn't know anything about food service. I didn't know about restaurants, you know. But what I did know was that I did love people. And so I had to have great people around me that were better than I was, stronger than I was, more knowledgeable than I was. And I found them. If they weren't there, I found them. My job initially was to get the people there, our fellow team members, to believe in themselves, to believe in each other, to believe in the product, to believe in the brand, and ultimately to believe in the future, and hopefully to believe in our Lord and Savior. And we were a public company, so it was a little bit limited how bold we could be with that. But that was the goal, believe. So how did we go about doing that? I went down to the HR people and I said, what can we do for these people? They're hurting. The stocks have won. The world's telling them they're going bankrupt. The U.S. News and World Report, do y'all remember that magazine? It was a big business magazine at the time. We were the cover story about a month after I got to Krispy Kreme. The cover story was a picture of our donuts going through our glazed waterfall, and the headline was, a company that will not be here a year from now. So that was, I'll admit, I kind of looked skyward. I said, Lord, did I hear you right? Am I really supposed to be here? But what we did is we took that color cover, and we framed it, and we put it down in the lobby where all of our team members came in. We put a brass plaque below it with one word and an exclamation point, wrong. And we used that as a motivation, as a motivator from that day forward. We were going to prove them wrong. So I went down to HR, and I said, what can we do? And they said, they're hurting. One out of every 3 of our employees have been laid off. They need some time off. So we came up with a plan to give them 5 days off between Memorial Day and Labor Day, 5 extra days off. The catch was they had to use it on the weekend, either Friday or Monday, to extend their weekend, and they had to use it for one of 3 reasons: to extend their faith, to do something with their family they couldn't have otherwise been able to do, or to go out and make a difference in their community. And in that order, faith, family, and community, in that order was very intentional, very intentional. So I don't have the words to tell you what that did for our culture and our morale. It was just amazing. I'd come in on Fridays or Mondays, and I'd see 15 or 20 team members out front in jeans and T-shirts getting ready to go do a Habitat for Humanity house or going to a children's home, doing any kind of project for the community. It was just unbelievable what it did to bring people together and get them excited. And in our meetings, we gave God the credit for what was taking place. So Faith, Family, and Community Days. I then went around as far as I could, including international, saying, what do you think we ought to be doing? And of course, they were thinking that I was one that was going to tell them what we're supposed to be doing. So I asked that question, but the common answer was always, man, Jim, we got to sell more donuts. We got to start making money. We're in trouble. So we had our first all-team meeting. Everybody was tuned in, either physically there or tuned in. And I stood up, and my opening comments were this. I told them what I just told you, that I'd gone around part of the world and gotten the same answer from almost everyone. And I was very serious. And I said, if that is our mission, if our mission is to sell more donuts and make money, then this needs to be my last day with you. And then I said, I do not want it to be the last day with you. Can we please get together and come up with a mission that's far grander than that? So over the next few months, we worked on that as a team, and we came up with our mission statement. And our mission statement was very simple: to touch and enhance lives through the joy that is Krispy Kreme. To touch and enhance lives through the joy that is Krispy Kreme. By the way, we didn't plan this, but it does have 12 words, and we sell a lot of donuts by the dozen, so that worked out well too. Maybe that was God's sense of humor coming in. For those of us that love Christ, we had a little change of that mission statement when we were at work, and that would be to touch and enhance lives through the joy that is Jesus Christ. So the interchangeability of those two words was wonderful and reminded us what we were really about. So we got the mission statement, and then after the mission statement, we got some core values, and I want you to hear these 4 core values because they were very much a part of our culture and very much a part of bringing Christ into the workplace. Number 1, we'll be servant leaders and stewards of the world around us. Servant leaders first. And, that's a very strongly Christian phrase, to be a servant leader. 2, we will pursue excellence in all we are and all we do. All we are coming first. We've got to be excellent people before we can do excellent things. 3, we will grow our company as a team wisely and profitably. As a team, wisely before profitably. And then last, we will be passionate about our devotion to faith, family, community, and Krispy Kreme, with Krispy Kreme coming in 4th place of the 4. So that was our mission statement and our core values. And then other things just happened naturally. We had a young man come up and said, I want to do a devotional, for the whole, team. Can I send out a daily devotional? I went to our general counsel. Are there any general counsels in here? I don't want to step on your toes, but the general counsel gave me the answer I expected. I said, can we do this? He said, no, we're a public company. And we were new working together, and I said, well, Daryl, that's not exactly the answer I had in mind. So could you please go back and think about it and come back and tell me how we can do it? He came back, and he said, as long as everyone that it's mailed to has asked to be on the list, we can do it. As long as we're willing to let people of other faith have an appropriate morning devotional, then we're fine. I said, great, yes to both. Let's do it. And that devotional still exists in Krispy Kreme, even with the change of ownership and the change of philosophy. We had a Bible study spring up in conference rooms on their own. One of them got so large that I went to the head of it and I said, could you please move your location? He said, why do y'all need our conference room? I said, no, we need you in the boardroom. I had a board that wasn't fully Christian, and I said, I want you to have the devotional there every week, the Bible study there every week. At the end of each session, I want you to do me a big favor. I want you and your group to pray for our board, pray for our wisdom, and pray for our Christ-like behavior. So we had Bible studies. I could go on and on and on and tell you about what was taking place in the culture, but it was all coming from above. It was all coming from our commitment to be Christ-like in who we were and what we did. The one thing I learned for sure, and that is I believe with all my heart, that culture is the foundation of success, that it dwarfs the importance of strategy and tactics. That if you get your culture right, and if you bring Christ into your workplace, your strategy and tactics are going to flow right from it, and they're going to work. And they're going to work in the ways that really matter. So having said that, did we succeed the way the outside world looked at us? Yes, we did. We ended up being taken private by a private equity group in the 20s, and price in the 20s, and it was considered very successful for our shareholders and all the people that were looking at us as a public company. But I don't think, that's not the way I want to leave you with thinking whether we were successful or not. I want to tell you a quick story that I think identifies our success better than any financial results that could possibly come. And that story came from our head of marketing coming down. By the way, we just hired our first head of marketing. Can you believe you have a brand like Krispy Kreme and you had no head of marketing? So I hired Dwayne Chambers, and he comes down to my office about a month after he's been there, and he said, Jim, I got the greatest idea for a marketing project. I said, great, Dwayne, what is it? He said, we're going to celebrate Talk Like a Pirate Day. I said, what? He said, we are going to celebrate Talk Like a Pirate Day. And I said, well, what is that? How do you talk like a pirate? He said, well, you say org or ahoy mate or Polly want a cracker. I said, uh-huh. And he said, wait a minute now, I can tell you're skeptical. He said, Jim, listen to this. This is the great part. We're the only one. Nobody else is celebrating that day. We'll have it all to ourselves. And I thought, I wonder why. So I said, well, Dwayne, I'm not sure the answer to our losing money when we're selling donuts is to start giving them away. He said, no, you don't understand. This is even better than that, bigger than that. I said, what is that? He said, if they come into the stores wearing 2 or 3 pieces of pirate paraphernalia, I interrupted him. I said, what's pirate paraphernalia? He said, a pirate hat, a sash, boots, a sword. I said, okay, what happens then? He said, we give them a dozen free donuts if they do that. I said, so everybody that walks in is either going to get a free donut or a free dozen. That's right. Doesn't that sound great? I said, I had to internally decide, okay, I hired him as the head of marketing. I'm not a marketer. I hired him for the job. This is what he's bringing to me. So I did what you have to do. I said, go for it. So we went for it. The day came. It was on a Friday. I got with the head of retail, and we went to as many stores as we could, as many as we possibly could. And I'll be honest with you, I've never seen the lines at our stores. There were traffic jams around some of them. We had to park a couple blocks away and walk in, and the lines were unbelievable. One problem. The lines were all at the pickup station for the donuts. There was no line at the cash register, none whatsoever. So I go home that weekend, and I'm ready. We get our financial report for the previous week on Monday at noon. I go in Monday morning just dreading what I'm going to see, and how am I going to tell the board that we had the worst week ever and we're supposed to be recovering. There's mail on my desk. I open up one envelope because it was handwritten to me, and it had a handwritten address on the back, a return address, Winston-Salem address. I open it up, and I'm going to paraphrase what it said. Dear Mr. Morgan, our son has leukemia, and the doctors say he doesn't have long to live. Said, I want to tell you a story of what happened this week. I went in his room where he stays in the bed in his pajamas, and the only thing he has in his bed is his laptop that he opens up sometimes when he can, when he's strong enough. And he had it in his lap, and he said to me in this whispered voice, Mama, come here. Walked over there, he said to her, I want to go to Krispy Kreme. She said, what? And he showed her the marketing piece that he had found on the internet. He said, if I go to Krispy Kreme, I can have my very own dozen donuts. Well, she smiled. She said, well, we'll see. That was on a Tuesday, she said. On Wednesday, he said the same thing. On Thursday, he said the same thing. So finally, her and her husband realized they better go out and get him some pirate paraphernalia. So they got him a sword, a hat, and a sash. Friday morning, the day of the celebration, they picked him up out of bed, left pajamas still on him, carried him to the car, drove to our Stratford Road store in Winston-Salem, which is our big store. And what I learned out later was when the people around there, it was crowded, when the people saw a father and a mother carrying their son in pajamas, apparently they literally made way for him. They just stepped aside. My general manager said it was a beautiful thing to see. They walked in the lobby. General manager's in there with all his pirate paraphernalia. He sees them. He asked the people in the lobby to kind of step aside for a minute. He walks up to him and he says, matey, draw your sword. You and I are going to have a sword fight. So the father pulled the sword out, put it in his son's hand, and about that time the general manager fell down. He lost the sword fight. Well, from what I understand and what the mother said in the letter, he got his dozen donuts. They got a couple more dozen. They had an amazing time. They went home and put him to bed with his donuts in the bed beside him. And here's what she closed the letter with, which I'll never forget. She said, Mr. Morgan, we had not seen our son smile in a long, long time. And we thought we would never see him smile again. On Friday, we heard him laugh. On Friday, we heard him laugh. So was Krispy Kreme successful? In my opinion, yes. Because I was so busy thinking about profits and the report that noon, I forgot about our mission statement, to touch and enhance lives through the joy that is Krispy Kreme. And by gosh, that Talk Like a Pirate Day lived out our mission statement throughout the country that day. And therefore, in my opinion, by touching those lives, we were successful. So here's my closing thought. I think that you can take a modification of that mission statement. And my charge to every one of us, including me, would be that we wake up every morning with a commitment that somebody's life is going to be better off today because we were here. And even more important, that somebody's life is going to be better off today because we shined our Lord's light today for them, with them, around them. It's going to be better. I think that's so important. And I know that might not be easy, and you might not have an opportunity every day to do it, but I will tell you, I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen outside of Krispy Kreme. I've seen it happen in a medical profession, for example. My son was going to have a surgery on his ankle. He was about 10 or 11 years old. And he's usually was a brave young man, but not with this. He was just scared to death. And he'd heard a lot about this IV thing, this intravenous thing they were going to put in his arm. We got him to the hospital. He was shaking. He was so nervous. We got him up into the preparation room. Peg and I were both with him, just the three of us in there. I'm holding his right hand. He's lying on his back. I'm over beside the bed holding his right hand. And the door opens, and the nurse practitioner came in. And she had the IV, on wheels, tube and all, and the needle. And she comes over, and boy, his hand's just like this. I mean, it was just, I looked at his face, and it was just pitiful. And she leans over, and she's putting the alcohol where the injection's going to be. And about that moment, out of her top of her uniform, out of the collar, a necklace fell out that had a cross on the end. And it was dangling right in front of my son, Jamie. And he looked at her, and he said, "Are you a Christian?" Her answer, her opportunity that she sees, "Yes, son, I am. I love Jesus with all my heart. He is the center part of my life." I want to tell you, and I'm not making this up, no more shaking. I'm holding his hand, and it's calm as it can be. I look at his face, and it's serene as it can be. She puts the IV in, he doesn't even blink, doesn't even wince. They come to get him to roll him out of the room. He doesn't, there's just no tragedy there at all. That one person made a difference in his life, my life, and Peg's life. We never got to find her to thank her, but she knows, and the Lord knows, that she touched and enhanced our lives that day. So what I'd say is this: if we all go out and do that, if we all go out striving to touch and enhance the lives of someone else in His name, with His light, I think the real life that's going to be enhanced is going to be our own. I think what we'll do for us, what He will do with us and for us, and the love that we will feel from Him, because we're living our life for Him, and we've got to do it in the workplace as well as everywhere else. Please, we've got to do it in the workplace. Most of us spend most of our waking hours in our workplace. We can't abandon Him the way I did early on. We've got to be there with Him, for Him, and loving Him. So thank you for this, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be with you this morning.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, sir. No interview.